Sucks. Hey, Brandon, for the very first time, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force recommending that U.S. doctors should regularly screen all adults under 65 for anxiety, said Lori Herbert, a task force member, co-author of the study and psychologist researcher at the University of Massachusetts Chan Medical School. Their recommendations are based on a review that began before the COVID pandemic, evaluating studies showing potential benefits and risks from screening. I had never heard of the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, which, by the way, Brandon, turns out is an independent volunteer panel of nationwide experts in disease prevention and evidence-based medicine with methodology. They use epidemiologists, biostatistics, health services, research discussions, economics, all sorts of things. And kind of a fascinating little thing that you maybe go down to find out about the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force. One final note, they do not consider the cost as a factor when they recommend things. So just take that into effect. All right, back to the original thought. Do we do a woke meter on studies like this?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, because we're doing it on the writer, not on the study. I mean,
It's just basically a study. It was Reuters.
Yeah, but it's from AP, and it's this gal. I'm such an old geezer. It's this woman, Lindsay Tanner. She's another wild card. She writes for the Associated Press, but she also has a website called the Muck Rack. So it's tough to tell. Her little bio is AP medical writer, lover of words in prose and music, mother, sharing life with a beloved contrarian, send news tips to blah, blah, blah. So hard to tell. She might be married to Jason Schatz, the most contrarian person I've ever met in my life, who will literally take the opposite side no matter what it is. Hitler, good or bad? Talk amongst yourselves. And Schatz would be, well, he's pretty good. He built some roads. Anyway, I would give her, I'm going to give her, I think she's on the woke. I think she's a 7 on the woke meter. Okay. That's my guess.
Back to the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force. They do all sorts of recommendations for medical things. And by the way, it's at this point I need to inform you, Brandon, you should probably get screened for syphilis. But back to this idea that doctors, they're advising doctors now for the first time to screen all adults under 65 for anxiety. I'm assuming when you come in for your regular checkup. That seems to make sense, seeing as how we're just coming out of a pandemic.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think this is probably spurred on by the pandemic. I know that mental health for a lot of people was really, really tough. I have never struggled with anxiety personally. I know a lot of people that have. I do think that anxiety most likely is probably a first world problem. Not to say that people that are in second, third world countries can't have anxiety, but I think that it's when you're really focused on getting the crops in and tending to the cattle, I'm not sure you have enough time to be anxious. I think that I kind of wonder if some of these studies, and I appreciate that they're even doing this, looking at this research, I wonder if they're going to find out eventually that a lot of it had to do with the amount of screen time we have, social media we have, excess that we have, choices. I think that my brother would always say it's paralysis analysis, right? Or analysis paralysis, sorry. That, if you have too many choices, it's really hard. So for instance, you walk into your kitchen, you're like, what cup to use? If you only have one cup, there's no choice. You just grab the cup, you fill it up, it serves its purpose, and you move on. I think when we have too many choices, it can create anxiety. That's, again, I am not a doctor, although I play one on this podcast. I am just spitballing here as to what really is going on with these anxiety moments.
Anxiety disorders are among the most common mental health complaints affecting 40% of U.S. women at some point in their lives, and more than 1 in 4 men experience some sort of anxiety. I would tend to agree with you. I don't know what the difference between anxiety and depression is. I'm assuming they're similar.
They're similar. Anxiety, depression has to do with sort of the fluctuation in our moods in terms of, when we're down, if the word would be down used to be, right, or happy, right? So those fluctuate. Anxiety is more akin to, I'm really anxious about losing my job, or I'm really anxious about I guess anxiety would be closer to like claustrophobia, those those sort of phobias that we have, right? People are afraid to leave their house. People are afraid, agoraphobia, right? We know somebody who lives with debilitating anxiety. We don't know what they do. We don't know how they leave their house. They can't drive. They can't do anything. They're just a mess. And I kind of wonder if back when people were living in smaller towns and villages and were surrounded by people, could you get away with that? Could you get away with never, or was there always that person that was like the freaky cat lady that lived in a house and never left? I mean, maybe these anxieties have always been there and we just weren't aware of it, or it wasn't talked about or thought about.
This sort of to the true nature of this article, which is saying on your regular checkup, when you got 20 minutes with your primary care physician, who you theoretically see once a year, in the the 20 minutes, he's going to cup your balls and make you cough, and then put the stethoscope on your heart.
They don't do that anymore. But
okay, well, whatever the case is, in the
Except
20
for your
minutes,
doctor.
they're saying, this independent panel saying that they should try to somehow ask the right questions of you to see if you have anxiety. It is worth it now for all doctors when you come in for your checkup to somehow kind of screen you for anxiety. Hey, are you freaking out? I don't know what they would ask, but
well, they're on every form now. When you go into a doctor's office, you got to answer those questions.
I don't. Not mine.
Well, they will. It's coming, right? And they're like, "Hey, have you ever been anxious?" Blah blah blah. I, gosh, well, I don't want to sound like one of those people that doesn't believe in science or medical, but I do wonder sometimes how much of this is real and how much of this is created. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Well, here's the point: if you're someone that goes to the doctor, you are in a really good spot. Like if you just go to the doctor regularly, you are probably not the problem. The problem is these crazy young males who are shooting everybody. They're not going to the doctor. Nobody's checking it on them.
Back to the young males shooting everybody.
I mean, right? Those are the ones that need to be going to a doctor regularly. The doctor's like, oh, yeah, this guy's crazy. He needs to be on medication. I
don't know if that's the same level of anxiety they're talking about in this study. I think they're really talking about people when I know they talked about women that are postpartum. When Corey had Maple,
yes,
she started getting anxiety, pretty severe anxiety, after she would be afraid to like drive. It was that, so clearly there's some chemical imbalance stuff going on in people's lives and things that happen that are just, medical. So I guess I wonder, parsing this, sort of separating these two, what is medical and what is something that's created by your environment? Maybe it's the same thing. I don't know.
1 in 10 pregnant women and postpartum women experience anxiety. What you had to say, it's about chemicals. I'm assuming anxiety probably when women go into menopause, it's probably different. Men, when I don't know, what's the big change in our life when I have kids? I definitely got more anxious when I had kids.
Well, but I think that's a higher order anxiousness as opposed to anxiety. Anxiety is like you can't control it. So I am really claustrophobic. And at different times in my life, I've had different. I would go into like just a regular room, and if you shut the door on me and I felt trapped, I'd just start not hyperventilating, but I'd get really anxious. Right? I've been able to control that by just breathing and focusing on whatever. I don't know where that comes from. I think it's when my older fat sister stuffed me in a sleeping bag and stuck me there. I think that's what created it. I really do. I think that's what happened. But I think that anxiety, true anxiety, people cannot control it. They cannot control the fact that they are getting this weird palpitations. They're breathing fast. They're just, their heart's racing. It's really hard. I know for me on an airplane, if I'm on a small plane, everybody stands up. It could be, I just have to sit there and go, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. They're going to get off this plane soon. It could be really, really stressful. Now, again, is that anxiety? Probably some form of it. But I think here's the long and the short what I think. Regardless of whether it is or not, I think it's good that doctors are screening for it.
You want me to fix your plane problem?
Sure.
You just drink 2 bottles you just drink some booze. Have a couple of vodkas.
Pass out.
In your Coke or whatever it is. You got no problems on a plane.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why people take Zoloft and other anxiety meds. I think that my one last thing I'll say about sort of anxiety and what I think is that I do think that we're the most over-medicated and medicated country in the history of the world. We medicate for everything.
Yep.
I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing. So everybody I know now has an anxiety issue. I'm like, really? Everyone has anxiety?
Well, so just to push back on that, though, like just compare it to Europe, they're much more family-oriented, right? Whereas we're way more independent. We're on our own more often and we're taking more medication. Whereas, like you mentioned, like if you're in the town square, somebody like, that guy's crazy. Nobody, people lock themselves in houses for weeks and months and years, and nobody even knows about it.
Well, so you've put the finger on the problem. In my opinion, is that we as a society need to get healthier. We need
Yeah.
to start becoming more community and family oriented, not in an unhealthy way, but in a healthy way. I think those are going to solve some of the problem. We need to spend less time on social media, taking pictures of the food we're eating, and more time face to face with people, having real conversations.
So what I feel like I hear you saying is less Jack in the Box, more time with Uncle Jack, and less time putting your nether regions on the TikToks and let everybody see them.
Yes, Larry, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Thank you for letting me teach you today, Brandon.